star out of me. They'll make a film about a man who's sad and lonely, and all they gotta do is act naturally. Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can never tell. The movie's gonna make me a big star.
Hi, welcome to Cinema Scene on C19 TV. And if you're listening online to the podcast, that's WGWG.org. Also, radio, WGWG.org. We appreciate it. We have a lot of fun right here each week. And I tell you, it's been interesting as we have kind of looked at doing some things in a different fashion because of COVID-19. And we've had some guests that normally we probably would not have. As you notice, Greg Tillman is not here today. He was having some technical difficulties. I don't get it. Greg, if I can get on, Thomas can get on. If Eric can get on from Canada, I don't know why you can't get on like from across the county. I don't get it, Greg, but hey, we'll give you a pass. We'll give you a pass. Thomas Manning joining us here, and Eric Marchen. There's Greg. He did it. Greg joined us.
I don't know what I did right, but I made something.
Well, Greg,
don't expect me to repeat it next week.
Well, we were just talking about you and saying, you know, if Eric can get on from Canada, why can you not get on from across the county? So we're glad you're here. We're glad you're here.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm just thrilled that something's working right. It's a full-on Monday.
Well, Eric Marchen joining us from Canada. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you as well. I hope it's a little warmer where you guys are. It was snowing last week. So, you know, on top of COVID-19, we still have snow in Toronto. We're living in that stereotype of Canadian weather still. So, yeah. I'll
trade places with you. Any
Greg,
day.
Yeah, Greg loves the snow. He's got his snow skis. He's actually, if you look behind him somewhere, there's skis and toboggan and probably a scarf or two back there as well. So, well, we are glad to have you, Eric. I'm glad you could join us. I've been wanting to get you on the show for some way, somehow for a while, and I'm glad we can make this happen. Well, give us a little background about where your love of film started, and then we'll kind of dive into how the whole film criticism thing started for you. You and I have known each other for a couple years now. We met at the Critics' Choice Awards. We were sharing the same table, and we got to spend time with family.
Yeah, it was great, and you know, since then we've kept in touch, and you know, to have the opportunity to do this is a lot of fun, and I think, you know, for people that love movies and talking about movies, it's more than just a job. It's a passion. It's a way of life, and sort of communicating with each other and actually finding people that are in a similar boat and in similar interest is always a wonderful thing, because when you're younger and you're kind of, you know, first developing your love and passion of film, you kind of feel alone, like you're that nerdy movie guy that likes those movies that nobody knows, or, you know, that only one or two people will give a chance if you recommend them. But as a kid, I mean, I only really had two passions, and the first was marine biology. And then as soon as I saw Jaws, I became too afraid of the water, and my love of film became the obsession that I had. And so I was completely enamored by the making of that movie and the process of that film. And obviously there are countless documentaries of, you know, the shark is not working and things like that. And you appreciate everything that Spielberg does as not only a great filmmaker, but as a storyteller. And those two things come together quite well. And then specifically, I was gravitating towards genre, horror movies specifically. So I'd always go to Blockbusters or Rogers Video and rent a movie based on a cover. Now, they're not always the best movies ever made, but that was kind of like my learning process. And then I went to college for broadcasting and film. And, you know, I always had more of an analytical point of view of making movies and breaking them down and how they work and what works and what doesn't. And, you know, and I thought that, you know, my opinion had some value or merit. And so on that, I kept on going. And, you know, I mean, I read all this Pauline Kael and Roger Ebert, like that, obviously. And then, you know, you keep on branching out and you get to actually become a part of that community and get to talk to people like yourselves today. So that's kind of the origin story.
Yeah. Well, Greg is a fan of Jaws as well, and Greg and I both have similar stories relating to Jaws. We both saw Jaws for the first time at the beach. Now,
Not
Greg,
the smartest thing to do.
what?
Not the smartest thing to do.
Now you stayed out of the water, but I chose immediately to go in.
No, I went in the pool afterwards.
Well, I went back into the ocean and I had a lot of fun scaring people. That was just kind of my love. And so, yeah, I was drawn to that. And my son Thomas has similarities as the way he would treat people as well, right?
Well, no, I don't think so. I'm just saying that's the childhood I grew up in. Like, that's the type of father I had for 20 years thus far. I don't know how I've made it, but I have somehow. So
It's amazing you turned out as well as you have.
I know it really is. Yeah.
Well, in spite of things, he has, and I'm glad. I'm glad. Well, Thomas, you have a love for this film that deals with sci-fi, and I think there's a connection with you and Eric as it relates to this guy named Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. Well, I saw your list, and I think every cinephile, movie buff, film lover, whatever you want to call them, has that one film throughout their life that they can look to and say, all right, that's the one that really ignited my passion. And for you, it looks like it was Jaws. For me, I would say it was Star Wars. And seeing that Star Wars is on your list, that made me very happy, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars is one of those quintessential, formative movies for anybody that grew up, obviously in the 70s, but carrying on. I mean, I remember getting to see them with my family with the re-releases in '97, and, looking back at it now, some of the choices George Lucas made with adding in, Jabba and A New Hope and changing the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi might not have been the greatest, but watching them on the big screen is an experience like no other. But just watching them in general, it's the greatest fantasy series. It's the greatest hero's journey I think ever, captured on screen. And, you can make fun of and poke at the prequels, and deservedly so, but at the same time, it's like you can kind of forgive them because they're part of that mythology and that lore. So it's always good to revisit those movies, especially in times like these when you need something to kind of comfort you or make you feel that it's it's going to be okay. And again, with the re-releases on 4K, they look stunning, and I just hope that Disney eventually releases the original cuts from the 70s and early 80s, because that would be fantastic.
Yeah, agreed completely. I'm hoping that happens. Now, Eric, you are doing film criticism. You've been doing TV for a while.
Yep.
Talk about how you got into that and where people may be able to find you online.
Okay, yeah. So I started as a co-op student in high school back in 2006, and Rogers TV Durham is sort of a place where a lot of co-op students go if they want to get into broadcasting and film, because it's the closest thing to Toronto in terms of tech and television. And again, I always had this obsession with movies. I was called a walking encyclopedia. And then one day I had a conversation with a producer on a show called Daytime, Judy Kalo. And Judy said, okay, well, what do you like doing? And I said, well, I love talking about movies, besides also helping behind the scenes and working on that kind of stuff. And she said, okay, well, talk about the most recent film that you really liked. And at that point, it was The Departed. And so we talked about Scorsese, we talked about Mean Streets, that's her favorite movie, for a good half an hour. And she said, okay, well, how about this? Next week, we'll put you on the show on a segment called The Daytime Film Fan. And then from there, I went on. I was terrible. I was so robotic. I was so afraid and nervous because I didn't like doing, like even just like public speaking, presentations in front of classes, but I knew my stuff, and I still came off as kind of robotic. But Judy saw something in me that I didn't, and from there I kept doing it, and I got better and better over the years. And then eventually went to college, started working part-time at Rogers, and then came back full-time. And eventually we were like, okay, well, let's actually do a show, which it started out as the Film Slate and then became Cinema Scene, and just kind of expanded from there. And so again, the community, the critic community in Toronto and in Canada is very small. It's much kind of sort of divided between Toronto and Vancouver specifically, and that's about it. And you'll get some people on the outskirts, but other than that, like everybody knows each other. So having that experience of connecting with people that are also, again, very like-minded, and going to the movies was just a great experience. But also, I think doing something like this really opens you up, and you get to have conversations, but at the same time, you better your own sort of, conversation skills. And I think that that's a key component. And again, it's a lot of fun talking to you guys just about movies.
Hey, Greg, does that sound a little familiar about the robotic and then somebody giving somebody a chance?
I have clips I can queue up if you want of Noel's first TV shot.
Let's see it. By all means.
Yeah, Eric, I mean, listening to that, it was almost like hearing my own story, at least the part about getting on TV, because Greg gave me a shot and I really was very stiff. I was so used to doing theater and I was trying to do things in a theatrical way, and it just didn't work. But Greg just continued to say, no, you got it. Come on, keep coming back, keep coming back.
I believed in him for one, and second of all, I had a lot of airtime to kill.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it allowed people to laugh at what was going on, whether they were supposed to or not. So, well, so Eric, what are you drawn to now? Let's look at some of your list of films, your comfort films in a time of chaos. We've already talked about Star Wars, but give me another one or two on your list, and why.
Yeah, I mean, I always seem to gravitate towards genre movies. So, I have the kind of the classic tastes of the diehards. I don't mind watching it any time of the year, even though it is a Christmas movie. Or, something like The Burbs, which is the perfect staycation film in a lot of ways. And I think it's Joe Dante's most underrated movie. But last night, you tagged me in a post in the what's my opinion of the 5 most perfect movies. One of them was Jaws, which we've already talked about, but another is John Carpenter's The Thing, which I think is one of the best remakes from the 1980s, next to maybe David Cronenberg's The Fly as well. But also, it's just a great special effects film. It's a great movie about isolation and feeling alone, but there's something also kind of amazing about watching this movie, that you get something new from it every time you watch it. And Kurt Russell's subtle performance, the synth score by Ennio Morricone, that's basically just copying John Carpenter's style of composing, which is just one note. Some of the best dog acting I have ever seen in motion picture history. It's a fantastic movie, and I love the ending, even though some people kind of consider it to be controversial because of its abrupt nature and leaving it open-ended. But I think that as a whole, that movie is just at the height of John Carpenter's powers. And Dean Cundey was a cinematographer who would go on to work with Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis on movies like Jurassic Park. So, I mean, again, I think just a perfect movie.
Do you still find yourself drawn to horror films?
I do, especially in situations of anxiety or stress. I always find kind of facing a horror movie to be cathartic in a strange way. Like when this was starting to happen with the pandemic, I actually watched Contagion back in February, and I mean, it scared me to death, but at the same time, I felt a little less afraid afterwards, if that makes any sense, just because it's like, okay, well, this is a movie and this is like the worst case scenario, even though it's quite believable in its premise and structure. But at the same time, it's something that I think, we can all relate to, what's going on right now, because it's affecting everybody. But horror movies have always kind of been a comfort to me, especially 80s horror movies, because I love the cheesiness of them. And I
Yes.
love kind of the practical effects. Like, that's the thing that I miss in a lot of those movies. And there are a lot of good, practical driven sort of horror movies, again, like The Thing, which makes you appreciate where they were coming, then, where you had to shoot everything in camera.
Yeah. Thomas has become a big fan of practical effects too, and we've talked a little bit about this. And Thomas, any practical effect films that, whether it's horror or even action films, that you just want to talk about real quick before we go to a break?
Well, let's see. Looking to something more recently, even just this past summer, the creature feature Crawl, about the the alligators under the crawl space in Florida that we saw together. A few scenes in particular in that one really just boggled my mind that they could pull off something like that. And that's, of course, a more recent example, but that the foundations of that can be traced back to John Carpenter back in the 70s and 80s.
Awesome. Good choice. Well, we're going
And
to take
Quentin Tarantino's favorite movie.
That
of
was
last year.
favorite movie of 2019. Indeed, that's correct.
Yeah, and Eric got to spend time with Quentin Tarantino, sent me this text, and I was so upset, but then I got to spend time with him at the Critics' Choice Awards. So we're even on that, man. Well, we're going to take a quick intermission right here on Meet Me at the Movies. Really glad to have Eric with us, Thomas, and John Candy from Canada. Also here, that's Greg Tillman. For those of you that may not know, his original name was John Candy. So we're glad to have him. So do you have a favorite Canadian filmmaker or film or actor you want to talk about?
Yeah. Quickly, I'll say one of my favorite filmmakers, Canadian-wise, is David Cronenberg. Again, sort of dealing with body horror and sort of Marshall McLuhan and things like that, from Videodrome to The Fly. And actor, I mean, obviously mentioning John Candy. I mean, who doesn't love Planes, Trains, and Automobile and SCTV and things like that? So we've had a couple good people come out of Canada.
Oh, absolutely, quite a few. What, Greg?
I just said tons of them.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick intermission. We're going to come back and talk about favorite scenes from movies we would love to be an extra in. That and maybe more right here on C19 TV's Meet Me at the Movies.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me.
Just want to let you know, I care.
I care.
I care.
I care.
I care.
I care. I care.
We care about you at Cleveland Community College because we're a family. With all the recent changes that have occurred across our nation and the world, we've been forced to make changes to our schedule and to the daily operations of our college. And we want to make sure that you're able to stay on track with your courses. CCC's care team is ready to help you.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me.
Welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here, hanging out with Thomas Manning, Greg Tillman, and Eric Marchen. Really glad to have you, Eric, from Toronto. And man, you've had a chance to do some pretty cool film festivals too, and you're in the midst of film festival country with TIFF. How has that changed what you've been able to be involved in from a filmmaking standpoint, a film reviewing standpoint?
Well, that's a great question. Right now, it seems to kind of be up in the air with TIFF at the moment. There seems to be a digital component being proposed for September, because that's when the festival is, the first 2 weeks of September. But TIFF, even though it's closed right now, has kind of adapted to creating an interactive way of watching movies with film lovers. We have a sort of a cable network called Crave, and every week now they're working in tandem with Crave to have a movie of the week. So, like, for example, one of the founders or the creative director of the festival, Cameron Bailey, had a interactive Q&A with Mandy Patinkin for Princess Diaries. So, or Princess Bride, pardon me. And with that,
Diaries?
I'm thinking Gary Marshall and Rob Reiner, but yeah, with the Princess Bride, you got to see this kind of interaction between the two. So things like that are kind of interesting. But in terms of watching movies, the last film I saw theatrically for a press screening was Bloodshot. And I was just kind of like, why is this the last movie I have to see? You know, this is the film that I'll have to admit to people. It's like, yeah, the last movie I saw in theaters was Bloodshot. But you know, it's one of those things where I do really miss it, and just going to the theater, you know, every morning or every other morning when you get a press invite, and knowing that you have kind of just a routine outside of the daily 9 to 5, and that kind of thing I miss. And also just being with people that are also interested in watching the movie and talking afterwards, and just having that experience, that communal experience of watching a movie, and it is missed.
Yeah, we've talked about that too, and I feel the same way. I really do miss that experience of going and spending time in the theaters. But I'm glad we get to talk about what we have been able to watch and what we can continue to watch, even though we can't go to the big screen right now. Well, what if we could be on the big screen? What if we could be an extra in any film scene? I've given this as an assignment to all of you, and we're going to talk a little bit about that the next few minutes. Thomas, we'll start with you. Choose any film scene, and we'll see how many of these we get to, but I know you've got a few on your list.
That's right. So I think we'll go back to 1986's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You might have heard that I like this film once or twice, but I don't know if I've ever talked about it. Who knows? But I think the one particular scene in this that I would love to have taken part in has got to be the Chicago parade, the twist and shout montage where, of course, Ferris gets up there on the float and all of his friends are a bit worried he's finally going to get busted, but he does not care at all. He's just having a good time, and he gets basically the entire city of Chicago just to sing and dance and have a great time. People from all different cultures and backgrounds and races, and it's just such a beautiful and uplifting scene. And if I could have been there in that moment in film history, that would have meant the world to me.
That's one of those feel-good moments that you cannot escape, and you don't want to escape it. You want to embrace every second of it you can. Greg, what's on your list, man?
What I would consider another beautiful and uplifting scene, I would love to have been a part of the food fight scene in Animal House.
Yes. Why? Just because you like food being thrown at you? Because I could do that right now.
That's been done before, not by you. It's probably a matter. It just looks like, how could you not be having a good time doing something like that?
Exactly.
Same room with the great John Belushi. Why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Eric, what about you, man?
All right, I'm going to be the pretentious one here. So I am going to pick 2001: A Space Odyssey, the opening monolith scene with the primates interacting with the alien monolith that's there. I would love to be dressed up as one of those primates and sort of watch in the background Stanley Kubrick work obsessively, on take 95 and see how his process of filmmaking works. So that would be something to really experience in terms of seminal science fiction motion pictures.
Absolutely. Good. Yeah, good choice. Nothing like dressing up like a primate. I mean,
oh yeah.
Primates, food fights, and dancing on floats. Mine's a little different. The first one I'm going to pick out is just because I would love to hang out with Wonder Woman. And so seeing Wonder Woman go through no man's land and taking on the army that's trying to keep her from crossing, that scene, every time I watch it, I just still continue to get blown away by the emotion that I feel within that particular scene. So the Wonder Woman no man's land scene is definitely on my list. All right, Thomas, what else is on yours, buddy?
We're going to go with the Battle of Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers in 2002. And this is basically the epic battle of all epic battles. It's the standard that everybody has tried to reach in the years since. Game of Thrones got close a couple of times, but I don't think they ever quite reached that height. But if I could have been there with, I'm sure hundreds and thousands of extras, I don't care if I'm just an elf that gets like cut down by an orc. I don't care what it is. Just put me in the scene. I want to be there. And just to be directed by Peter Jackson, who's one of the most Mad Men directors of the past 20 years, that would have been just an unforgettable experience.
Good choice. Good choice. Greg, what's on your list, buddy?
There's a scene in Casablanca where the Germans are enjoying their time at Rick's, and they start singing the German national anthem, and the French counter by singing the French national anthem. That was one of the most powerful scenes in a wonderful movie. I'd love to have been a part of that.
Especially at the time in which that movie was released.
Yeah, they didn't know if they were going to win the war or not. They didn't know when he was going to win. It was what, 1942, 43?
Yeah. Good choice. Good choice. Eric, another one on your list.
That's a perfect movie as well. Again, just even the end with Claude Rains and Humphrey Bogart, round up the usual suspects, perfect. My second one would be the Under the Sea dance for Back to the Future. I would just love to hang out and party to, Michael J. Fox rocking out, Marty and Doc doing their thing, trying to avoid being caught and also get back to the future. I just think it's one of the most enjoyable and fun experiences I've ever had watching a movie. And it shows on the set, and I would love to be a part of that movie.
Yeah, Thomas and I revisited the Back to the Future trilogy just a few weeks ago, and that first one really is, I mean, it's still a perfect film, and it still is so good on so many different levels. And I would love that scene as well, just to see the history of rock and roll happen right there at that dance. On my list, I've got quite a few, but I'm going to say Dead Poet Society, the Old Captain, My Captain scene. I've always been a fan of Robin Williams, and that movie spoke to me in a lot of different ways. And being an extra in that classroom when that was happening, I would just love to absolutely be a part of that. Well, we've got time quickly for one more, and then we're going to wrap things up. Thomas, go ahead and dive in with one more if you got it.
All right, yeah, my age is really going to show here, but I'm gonna go with from Avengers Endgame, the Avengers Assemble moment. This was basically the climax of an 11-year cultural event, and that was probably that one particular sequence when everybody came back, probably my favorite theatrical experience I've ever had. And of course, thinking back to that, and this time a year later, where theaters everywhere closed, just the memories, that kind of just brings me a warm feeling inside. I can't wait to get back to something like that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Right there with you. Getting back to the theaters. Oh man, I'm looking forward to it. All right, Greg, give me something else on your list, and we'll go with Eric.
Near the end of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, there's a filibuster scene, and I'd love to have been in the Senate chambers watching Jimmy Stewart work. I mean, what a thrill that would have been, and Capra too, for that matter. I think that'd been a very emotional, powerful thing to witness.
Absolutely, another amazing film and amazing talent as well. Eric, one more from your list, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. I'm going to go hang out with Harrison Ford at the noodle stand and just, watch him eat some noodles for a couple of minutes. I think it's one of those great, neo-noirs, but at the same time, it's not really interested in getting anywhere particular plot-wise, and I just think it's a great hangout movie, and also of the early 80s, sort of that post-punk, steampunk aesthetic. So, yeah, Blade Runner would be, and plus you get to dress up in some pretty wicked outfits, so Blade Runner is definitely one I'd love to be on set for.
Yeah, and you talk about kind of a visual masterpiece. And that movie was truly a visual masterpiece. And I think about, for my next one that we're going to talk about, 1917 was just a visual spectacular. And the scene of running against the tide, where you've got all of these people coming out of the trenches and you're trying to make your way across this line, that scene just absolutely blew me away. And Thomas was talking about he would love to be the extra that got knocked down, or the extra that knocked down the lead in that, because it wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah. They just kept rolling because it was the best take.
It was, and that scene just still blows me away. So I've got a thing about World War I for some reason. But Eric, man, we're so glad we got a chance to spend some time with you today. Thanks for joining us. I'd really love to have you back at some point.
Absolutely.
So if anybody wants to track you down, not stalk you or anything, but if anybody's interested in your work, what's the best way that viewers can find you?
Yeah, so you can go to rogerstv.com/cinemascene. Scene is spelled SEEN, and you can follow me on most of the social medias at EM6211.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, and really appreciate you spending time with us. Thomas Manning, Eric Marchen, and Greg Tillman for Meet Me at the Movies. As always, we try to close with a movie quote of the week, and this one comes from the movie Her, and this is Amy speaking. We're only here briefly, and in this moment, I want to allow myself joy. And what a perfect quote for this crazy, crazy time. Allow yourself some joy, and I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for spending time with us right here on Meet Me at the Movies, C19 TV. You can find us online at c19.tv. And if you want to download the podcast version of this, that's WGWG.org. Till next time, that is a wrap.